Gaza City is systematically being destroyed, one building at a time. The Israeli military is widening its assault on the Strip's last remaining major urban center. Israeli aircraft have launched violent attacks near tents housing thousands of Palestinians. The strikes were targeting 3 UNRWA schools in Al-Shati camp in the north of the city. Displaced families have been using the buildings as shelter. At least 12 Palestinians have been killed across Gaza since dawn. 4 Palestinians were killed when Israeli forces shot at civilians near an aid distribution point on Salah al-Bindin Street in the central Gaza Strip. The injured and dead were taken to Al-Wada Hospital. Hani Mahmoud now joins us live from Gaza City. Tell us about the latest strikes, Hani, and what you've been seeing.
Well, initial reports confirmed that the 3 people were inside these group of homes or cluster of residential homes in Gaza City toward the southern part of Gaza, just a few miles from this particular point. They were threatened and warned by the Israeli military ahead of getting bombed. These people were trying to salvage any of their belongings from these homes when the bombs were dropped on this particular cluster of residential homes. As many as 3 residential homes back to back were bombed and destroyed. 3 people were killed and many were injured as they were reported to a Shifa hospital. Almost simultaneously at the same time, drops were being dropped on Al-Rayas residential block. That's the particular area that was threatened by the Israeli military. A shelter refugee camp, a school was threatened and bombed within just a time frame of 15 minutes. Another school within also a short notice, just leaving people scrambling for shelter outside, running while panicking because there is no shelter for them, leaving behind many of their belongings and many of the supplies they've managed to collect over the past few weeks. We're seeing a significant increase of the aerial attacks across Gaza City, counted by 10 to 15 minutes. We hear an explosion followed by multiple other airstrikes in the area. That's happening on the frequent of 10 to 15 minutes across the city, from the north into the central part and the southern part of the city. And what seems to be an attempt by the Israeli military to drive people out of the city, because the pattern of attacks have been concentrated on areas that still have some buildings standing where people have been sheltering either inside these buildings or end up building their tents at the vicinity of these residential towers or residential buildings in the western and the central part of Gaza City. And it looks like the Israeli military is using this tactic to cast fear, cast panic, and applying extreme military pressure to drive people out of the city.
Hani, what about those people who moved to Al-Mawasi in the south? What have they been saying? Because some of them have actually come back because there's simply no place for them to stay.
Absolutely, and we've seen many examples of families roaming in the area of Al-Mawasi evacuation zone, searching for a place to set up their makeshift tent. And then they are challenged by many of the difficulties on the ground. The lack of water resources, for example, is causing a greater challenge for many of the families who are trying to live on the bare minimum of basic supplies that are available in the area. But we're talking about an area over the past 2 years completely eroded. It used to be a field, an agriculture field with lots of resources, and it is now completely eroded by months of devastation and destruction, and let alone the continuous bombardment that this area has been subjected to over the past 23 months. Water resources are very, very depleted in the area, only toward the western part near the coastal road of Al-Mawasi, and it's a very salty water, not proper for human consumption. But people who are at that area have no choice but to use it and live with the consequences of consuming this water. Toward the center of Al-Mawasi, the eastern part of Al-Mawasi, there is no water sources for people available, and that is pushing people back to the central area, toward Deir al-Balah city. The challenge that people face in central area, it's already overcrowded with the majority of still intact buildings filled with displaced families. Any pocket of land that was available over the past years is now filled with many of the tents. Literally, you look at the city that is more of an ocean of tents filled with displaced people. Interestingly, many people are walking back to Gaza City because the horror that they lived through here in Gaza City is being repeated in central area and Al-Mawasi evacuation zone. We were told is no difference. Death and destruction and devastation. The lack of resources is everywhere across the Gaza City. So there is no point of evacuation because for them, evacuation at this point is more of a death sentence. Instead of dying in Gaza City, they were waiting for death in central and southern part of the Strip.
Hani, thank you. Hani Mahmoud there in Gaza City. Now, thousands.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news, expert insight. Like, share, stay ahead.